Regardless of whether or not he loses the WWE title on the very next show, AJ Styles has officially moved up one place on an elite list of company icons. Just recently, the Phenomenal One supplanted old TNA colleague Kevin Nash on the list of the 10 longest WWE title tenures of all time, joining some of the most important figures in wrestling history in the process. Holding the belt for periods as long as these reflects a rare belief in the performer, and it's made all the more remarkable given that Vince McMahon generally has the patience of me standing in line for the latest baldness cure. But who are these great men? Who are the performers so good and so well liked that WWE let them run with their top prize for so damn long? Well, let's take a look. I'm Andy for WhatCulture Wrestling, and here are the 10 longest WWE Championship reigns ever. Number 10, AJ Styles at 358 plus days. Now, if we're being honest, this title reign hasn't quite lived up to the lofty expectations, with the Shinsuke Nakamura feud particularly disappointing between the ropes. Like AJ's run itself, the matches were good, but rarely great. It's a shame because Styles was rightly cast as the savior after dethroning Jinder Mahal last year, and this was bookended by a couple of awesome pay-per-view bouts against Finn Balor and then Brock Lesnar. After Jinder, it has been great having a WWE champion of AJ's caliber, even if the writers haven't always supported him with the greatest material throughout several feuds. And here's another damning fact: the Dafties in the creative room haven't even had their supposed top prize headline a single dual brand pay-per-view since AJ won the belt. But none of this is AJ's fault. Styles is absolutely killing it himself, and long may he reign. Number 9, Hulk Hogan at 364 days. There was a lot to love about gross Gawker Shagger Hulk Hogan's second run with the WWE Championship, but it did serve as a way to mask the reality that WWE's post-WrestleMania boom had gradually began heading towards a bust. Randy Savage's 1988 tenure was a surprise box office smash, with his WrestleMania 5 surrender to the Hulkster doing incredible business for the company. Thanks to the lovingly crafted explosion of the mega powers for the full year, he ruled the roost. Hogan's best work after regaining the belt came against his former pal. With Randy, he continued to delight, but the summer's no-hold-barred feud with Zeus required Savage to carry the load, and a pre-WrestleMania rivalry with Mr. Perfect drew so poorly that WWE decided Curt Hennig was never a draw beyond the mid-card. Number 8, Randy Savage at 371 days. A sensational in-ring performer and a fabulous box office draw, the Macho Man Randy Savage was, on reflection, a creative masterstroke from Vince McMahon. Vince was running low on big lads to feed to the Hulkamania machine, having made the best of his biggest lad in Andre the Giant, so he used the all-star friendship Savage and Hogan had struck up in 1988 to strike gold with Bove a year later. Savage's entire run was laced with his best friend's constant shadow, feeding just enough logic into the jealousy growing within the Macho Man. Their big tag matches together sold pay-per-views, while Randy's singles bouts with Ted DiBiase, Andre and more drew on the house show loops. The grand payoff at WrestleMania 5 was, at the time, the biggest payday in either man's career, making this year-long experiment of a title reign one of the shrewdest in WWE history. Number 7, John Cena at 380 days. He of Mark Wahlberg's haircut and Jackie Chan's weird punch was given everything between 2006 and 2007, as WWE tried frantically to get him over as the new leader, and a long title reign back then was as rare as a good hair day for Donald Trump today. Big Banter John saw off virtually every relevant threat, putting Edge, Kurt Angle, Umaga, Shawn Michaels and Randy Orton in their places, having already conclusively defeated Triple H during his second stint with the strap. He also evolved hugely as a worker during this run. Living up to high expectations, Cena was already a figure of near universal disdain in spite of his matches rather than because of them. He was showered in plaudits from discerning observers by the end, and his unfortunate October 2007 injury suffered against Mr. Kennedy left a massive hole in the roster. Number 6, CM Punk at 434 days. Towards the end of Chick Magnet Phil's iconic reign with the title, he spoke with bilious rage about the disrespect he'd suffered at the hands of a company supposedly geared around him, and he wasn't wrong. For much of Punk's reign, he was second fiddle to John Cena, a place he tried to walk out of when he first dropped his pipe bomb on WWE back in 2011. The idea that nothing had changed since then infuriated him, but the fire within fueled a heel turn that made far greater use of his time on top. Alongside Paul Heyman and against the likes of Cena, Ryback and The Rock, Punk was firmly at WWE's summit. It ended disappointingly as he was forced out of the picture for Cena and The Rock's twice-in-a-lifetime battle, but his legacy remains etched, no matter how hard WWE tried to scrub the man himself from history. Number 5. Pedro Morales at 1,207 days. Selected by Vince McMahon Sr. as the next great babyface hope for the Northeast Territory after Bruno Sammartino's shocking loss 1 month earlier, Puerto Rican hero Pedro Morales built on his increasing popularity inside WWE with a stunning victory over despised Russian gremlin Ivan Koloff. Morales had been a revolution for the promotion since arriving in November 1970, scoring a United States title glory in January before he was forced to vacate that belt after taking the big belt a few weeks later. Relative youth and a relatable demeanour amongst an ageing population of well-tenured stars made Pedro a natural fit for the big role. Amassing a truly impressive run with the belt, only John Cena, Bob Backlund, Hulk Hogan and Sammartino himself can lay claim to holding the gold for more cumulative days than our man here, and only the guys I'm about to talk about can touch his longevity within a single reign. Number 4. Bruno Sammartino at 1,237 days. Incredible not only for the length, but also for the fact that this was Bruno's second time with the big belt. The living legend's return to the top of the mountain continued much of the legacy he'd already established in his original iconic tenure, but more on that one later. With a victory over transitional champion Meat Senior aka Stan Stasiak in 1973, Bruno took back the throne a few years after a devastating loss to Ivan Koloff had silenced the Madison Square Garden crowd at the end of his first reign. It seemed improbable that WWE's original working class hero could meet the outstanding standards of his original reign. But 4 more years with the title enhanced his already solid status as one of the architects of the McMahon wrestling empire. Ending via injury rather than because he'd even remotely diminished as a draw, the idea of Sammartino's second run was only slightly less heartbreaking than the first, because the people hoped against hope that he might just scrape his way back to the top for a third time. Number 3. Hulk Hogan at 1,474 days. Big Orange Terry's inaugural stint with the WWE title will forever reflect the most important time in Vince McMahon's life as a wrestling promoter. The bombast, aggressiveness, and magnificence of his company's golden era. With Hogan front and center for expansion plans that completely reimagined the landscape of wrestling forever, Vince went on a tear through the territories that simply couldn't compete in virtually any area, using the machine he'd rapidly and shrewdly assembled. A loyal and moneyed Scrooge McDuck of a soldier as a result of his part in these plans, Hogan's aura as champion was truly incredible, attracting generations of supporters towards the product with his beautifully simplistic act. The Hulkster was a living, breathing embodiment of 80s American pop culture as it was happening. It was a feeling McMahon only successfully captured twice, first here, then again with Steve Austin's incredible journey just over a decade later. The Rattlesnake too was an icon of his time and a Mount Rushmore certainty, but Hulk, through this particular reign, was the first of his kind. Number 2. Bob Backlund at 2,118 days. Though somewhat disputed due to a 1979 loss to Antonio Inoki that Inoki ultimately refused and WWE ultimately elected not to acknowledge, Backlund's run from 1978 to 1983 with the company's top title cemented him as the turn-of-the-decade solution to the problems caused by Bruno Sammartino's decaying frame. More wholesome and technical than the ruggedly tough living legend, Backlund and his sheer reliability as a performer mirrored his stance with the organization when the cash came in. Business was healthy, if occasionally less spectacular, with Bobo on top, and Vince Sr. had no reason to mess with a formula that had served him so well for so long. A folk hero in New York, just like most early WWE champions, Backlund's reign had to end in order for Hulk Hogan's to begin. but by then the era had largely passed him by. The everyman Backlund was outdated, fans were turning on him, and McMahon looked instead to a hyper-inflated version of the babyface that came before him in Hulk Hogan via, of course, the Iron Sheik. And at number 1, Bruno Sammartino at 2,803 days. The original WWF take on the NWA stalwart champion Bruno Sammartino's first reign with the Northeast Territories title exponentially helped the organization's status as a breakaway rival to the established and largely trusted industry standard. This reign lasted 8 years. 8 years! That would be just under 16.5 times as long as Jinder Mahal's, and that thing felt like it lasted for a bloody ice age. Miraculously, Bruno's drawing power at the gates never faltered, and neither did his relationship with the adoring crowd. He was a champion not just of Vince Sr.'s wrestling, but of Italian-American communities that wore his success as a badge of honor, and blue-collar ringsiders that shared his working-class roots. Sammartino acted as an inspiration to countless fans and spectators that would be fish-hooked for life by the industry, and he came to define the entire booking style of the organization for nearly 50 years. It took an entire paradigm shift in the 90s for Vince Jr. to flip the script from having long babyface title holders to having heroes chase, and that's largely down to Bruno's incredible legacy.